Well, gosh, this is an on-time group, so let's be on the phone. Let me share my screen so we can check out the agenda.
Sure.
Maybe just squeeze it out a bit. Go off it, so, yeah.
That's not, that's your bail.
And this is full participation. Thank you so much.
So I'm Robert, AKA Bob. My friends call me Bob, my wife calls me Robert. So, delighted to meet you all and see practically everybody. It's a little kind of pushing it. Pretty much the rest of the summer, we're gonna be doing Zoom meetings. So that's because of all the travel folks have scheduled. And I wanted to just quickly glimpse at the agenda. This is for the first two meetings. So we don't need to cover all these points today, and it's more than fine if we don't. I mainly wanted to get through the introductions today, so we get a sense of who each other are and what our interests are, and see how that might affect the way we provide work, to the extent we want to do work. So I thought I would start with a brief reference to our charge. Is our new mayor, who we need to set up this committee, kind of orient us to today's conversation, and then go right into introductions. So Rohit defined the goal of the committee is to address resident concerns about tear downs and build ups, I'll call it. In my case, it was prompted by the house next door, on which the council decided to approve a permit just last week. Tear down, build up. But as a result of the process, the design of the house has changed significantly. You know, the developer, because of the town's process, shifted course in midstream, which I consider a successful outcome for the policy, but it was pretty bumpy. And I got a master class in what I consider to be the intricacies of the permit code and the permit processing on the part of the town, which maybe could stand a bit of improvement. And the interesting, somewhat paltering style of developers is they present information in the most favorable light as effective advocates for themselves. So I learned a lot about how that works and how it doesn't. So it's kind of a two-stage charge. I highlighted what I would call facets of the problem, because it's not just a simplistic idea of tear down bad, build up bad, or anything like that. It's nuanced. There's a question of scale, which some of us discussed at length on Grantham Avenue. Impacts on privacy and light, arguably changing the character of a block, if not a whole neighborhood. Mature tree canopy comes in with respect to most expansion of building size on a Somerset lot, and drainage concerns seem to be ridiculous, especially on lot sloping. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other is what he refers to as loss of diversity. And that's more of an economic impact on the range of income levels of people who can afford to buy the replacement housing or not afford to buy. Several neighbors tried to buy the Grantham house that was just permitted to be torn down. They wanted to buy the existing house. So there are questions about who can afford these houses, the impact on starter home inventory, the impact on available affordable housing stock, and the impact on tax assessments for everybody else. So this started to range. And when people invariably will ask us what's in, what's out for the agenda for the committee, what's in is this list, and I'll go to the details in just a minute. I'll leave this up because you might want to refer to it as you reduce your interests. What's in is this scope of issues. Some folks feel like this is already too long a list. And I discussed this with Pete yesterday, and his view is that this is the maximum. This is the list we can draw from. But he's not expecting that we will necessarily take on all these issues. My purpose would be to follow your interests. For example, if you had a topic that you'd like to work on yourself, that will become a priority because you're doing the work. I think we can probably have a rough consensus on the top 4 or 5 policy alternatives that address the community concerns about tear downs and buildups. And in my view, if we can get to 6 out of the 12 bullets on this list, we'll be doing well. Particularly if we can do it by, say, January and get a fulsome policy when we to the council. Our charge asks us to bring recommendations to the council. I'm personally less interested in the recommendations in the sense of endorsements, although that's fine. We can do straw polls and let the council know who likes which topic or which proposal. My personal interest is that I, based on my view of council proceedings that I've seen, they make decisions on incomplete information. So my goal is to give them a fulsome policy agenda, at least 4 or 5 good options, knowing that each one of them will have pros and cons, and give them a full idea of what those pros and cons are. Where has it been tried? Which other cities? Are those similar housing markets? What are the pluses and minuses, both from the residents' point of view and the block's point of view and the developer's point of view? We can give them that full information on good 5 or more alternatives. I think we'll have done a good job. So that's my take on our charge. I'll pause and catch my breath before I start picking on folks to introduce yourselves. Any reactions or immediate questions?
You've been given a pretty broad scope, I think, of things to tackle here.
Yeah, it was half this big when we
Yeah.
started. Rohit started making the rounds.
Well, and if you could just go back to the first page, I don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me, but if you could go back to the first page, yeah, that one. I feel like the second bullet point gets a little bit to be sort of involving macro issues that may be a little bit beyond our ability to sort of handle, but I'm happy that we're discussing it. I don't know that we're going to be able to come to some concrete answers either way to that, because again, I think that's a larger issue that Maryland as a whole is dealing with. But anyway, I'm glad that we're discussing it because I think it should be part of the overall equation as to how we decide, what to do here in this committee. But no, I think all these are really good topics. Again, I think we've got a lot to talk about. I also don't want to prevent us from being able to actually come up with some actual ideas and concrete things at the end. So I think, we should just need to remember to stay focused and really be able to come up with some actionable items that the council can use is all I'm trying to say. So,
Great. So that's a fantastic start to our introductions.
Oh, and I'm Erlinda Doherty. And I was been given the gift of being the council member liaison for this committee. So thank you for welcoming me here. And I've lived in Somerset now for 7 years. Moved here the summer before COVID. Lived in a lot of different places around the world. My husband was in the Army, so we've really had the chance to live in different countries, even different states, to really understand what makes Somerset so unique. So I think I, in some ways, bring a perspective of having lived in a million different places, what makes our town and our neighborhood so special, and why we want to keep it the way it is in a lot of ways, and retain its character and core. I have 2 kids that or 3 kids actually. 2 are in college, they're home now, which is the reason why I'm a few minutes late because they stole the car. I couldn't drive here, but and my daughter who's a high schooler at BCC. My husband is retired Army, active duty, now in the reserves as a radiologist, and I work for Alibaba, so I'm a state and local lobbyist, so also understand the policy process really, really well at the state level, which is another thing I think could come in handy too when we're talking about these larger issues and dealing with Annapolis and if their interests are different than ours here at the county, or sorry, at the municipal level. But yeah, that's it. Again, I just hope to learn a lot from you all, being perhaps longer term residents than I am. And just want to be open to all ideas and at the end of the day, just want to come up with a handful of really good recommendations the town council can use to move forward and make sure again that we retain the character and core of our lovely neighborhood here in Somerset.
Great. So let's just go back over to Justin and we'll go around the table.
Great, sounds good.
Actually, I don't have.
So I'm Justin Brigette, I'm the deputy town manager here. I kind of like the committee liaison for all the town committees, all the development committee meetings, kind of like the go-to person in terms of, if you have a question about, well, like, your contact person. Yeah. Send it before the one.
Do you have the Wi-Fi password?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, is it there? I can't. see
Yeah,
it.
so it's here. That's the.
Sorry, I can't. Figured you were the right guy to ask.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's town hall, and the password is 45 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That way I can follow the agenda. Thank you so much, EJ. Appreciate that.
I'm Michelle Scarfield. I have lived here for about 7 years. I live on Essex and I'm an architect. I'm a working architect. I work as an owner's rep right now, so I work with contractors every day. And a myriad of projects from the National Cathedral to restaurants to high-end residential. So I'm been working for 25 years, so I understand and respect the process. And I'm very interested. I actually happen to live across from the last house that was built by the developer who just got approved on your street. And I watched that building go up in par and and there's this process is just so broken. And I also wonder if there's one thing we could add to the first point. When you talk about stormwater, I wonder what they have to submit in order to get approved from the city council. Because I wonder if they just submit the things that look pretty and not really the hard drawings that show sort of where water is flowing, how they're dealing with it. I'm really unclear about that process. And I lived overseas when we were building on our house, so I had to have an architect here deal with the city. So I'm not sure what happens. I know all of our water's captured from our property, but anyways, I think that should be something we look into because I wonder if they submit incomplete drawings. Because I had asked Matt and Joy to ask that developer for stormwater management, and I gave them a whole list of things to fire back at that developer, which they wouldn't have known. So because he doesn't readily give those drawings, they're technical drawings, you know, we don't have anyone to actually look at those drawings. So anyways, that is a big interest of mine. So where water goes, how, you know, and how the developers sort of make it sound good, but don't really, you know, do the bare minimum and has to have a lot.
One of the town's liaisons to us, committee, Steve Serco, as council member, council president, and now he's the permit director, right?
Yeah.
So Steve can comment our request and give you a context briefing
Yeah, that would be
and get
great.
into the weeds.
Yeah.
I've seen them discuss a few permits now, they do get into the weeds, so
Okay.
whether it would meet your technical expectations, I have no idea. Anybody else?
Well, the town does have a set of drawings for the Grantham House. It shows the drainage plan.
Well, I asked Matt and Joy to ask for that. So I didn't know if
So
they
it was
read it.
submitted. The question is, the people who review it, myself included, I don't know the technicalities.
Yeah,
So it has to be reviewed by somebody who's really understanding what they're looking at, and it should be Steve Serco, and he seemed to be satisfied.
He does review the stormwater.
Yeah.
He's a professional engineer.
There is
He
a
understands.
stormwater component to every set of
oh, okay, yeah.
approved plans. They have to show what is added if the footprint is increased. How much, where is it going, and how they're managing it. So,
Yeah, I did see the plan that they submitted, and I sent comments to Matt and Joy to sort of comment on.
I believe the county actually, I mean, when we built our house, the county had to approve the stormwater plan.
exactly.
They paid close attention to it.
Well,
And I actually have the stormwater plan. I saw it next to natural.
oh,
Actually,
oh, you did.
actually, yesterday.
Okay, because you know, you could do the bare minimum, which is what that house is doing. Or you can, you know, I understood you couldn't, you know, what I see across the street from me and how I understand it are kind of two different things. Maybe he has a drainage village in the back as well, which I don't recommend, but they would, the place, whatever they have here. So anyway, I didn't like it, so I had comments on it, but I'd like to be involved a little bit in that process. If I could.
Sounds like we should flag that as an item. I mean, it's kind of flagged, but the details of the process and who reviews it, who approves it, what's the process for commenting on it? Do we have enough expertise
Yeah.
looking at that?
Because you
I don't know
can
the
fly
answers to
by
those,
and
but-
then
I drew a flag.
Awesome, it's a nice flag.
Well, if anybody's keeping track of questions, it also has to be built to what was approved. And we're going through a situation right now with a landscape contractor freelance. So he's now making it comply. And so there's not only what the county requires, Somerset requires, but it's also making sure that it was built for what was approved.
Yeah.
And,
that's always the shortcut. I'm telling you, it's always the
well,
shortcut. At
but,
the end,
but
they
that's,
always blow it.
this is, I think, an important thing that we
Yeah.
all understand what gets submitted and what are expectations.
That's a good
Uh,
point.
and, because clearly there is in the town, how did we ever get this? Who approved this? These are questions that get in, or on the sidewalk that we have discussions about. And then you talk to the people that moved in and they say, if I had known this, I wouldn't have moved
I
here.
know. It's-
And this gets back to community. And I think we gotta keep that balance in mind when we're discussing these things. Because already many people think it's too onerous to begin with. So, where do we find the balance? And, I think you sent up a library of stuff, and one of the phrases in there is, where do property rights stop and community rights begin? And I think a lot of this happens with people like this, introducing people to the community. And so I think it's important of setting expectations here. I jump in because I hear this all the time, and there's something missing between the cup and the lip. And it's spilling over people, and there's a lot of animosity. And one of the things we value is community. We just went through a logo change and survey, and what came out is community. And all these other aspects of trees and, all the activities are reflections of that. And we're taking a hunk of it and trying to manage that. So I think process is important, and it starts even before plans are drawn up. What expectations are and what it is to be, what we value as community. And I think, Bob, I'm glad to hear that the developer next door, I think, heard that message somehow. And so that to me, I'm trying to tie in just what I heard in these opening remarks, that people are making. And stormwater will continue.
Since you're talking, Jared, keep talking.
Well, I
Just say something.
moved in 91, family moved in 91 and just jumped into the pool and became part of the community, and a lot has changed. And I think, that there are a lot of headwinds there. My career was in commercial real estate, in private sector, and because real estate is got hits, I also worked in the public sector and also for nonprofits. And my background is in architecture and urban planning. But I jumped over to the dark side and was an ownership representative. And so it was investment interest in the private sector and the public sector. I was representing taxpayers, making sure they got value, and in the nonprofits, achieving what the membership, why they belong to the organization. And one of them was the Urban Land Institute, which is I'm curious what actually worked for them first 5 years in Washington, and that was kind of my master's. But enough.
Great.
We got Brian.
We have Brian about to leave. Brian, are you still with us?
He may have to
Why
leave.
is this meeting?
I am. I'm actually in the car. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you very well.
No one's ever sort of criticized me for too quiet of a voice. So, hi everyone, Brian Pilot. I moved into Somerset in 2007, so coming up on about 20 years. I live on Greystone. What's really got me excited to be part of this committee is the large house that was built a couple doors down from me, and coming into reviewing some of those drawings a little bit late, when it was kind of beyond its approval phase, and seeing where the code and the, some of the interpretations of the code were very stretched to allow for that house of that size to be built. I am an architect, a practicing architect here in Washington, part of a fairly large firm. I do a lot of work for the big bad developers. So I think I can bring a unique perspective on the motivations on that side to help sort of protect the beautiful context and site that we have in Somerset. So just excited to be part of this committee. I've talked to a number of you along the way, and look forward to future meetings.
Thank you, Brian. So let's go back to Maura.
Okay, hi, Maura Vanderzon. My husband and I have lived in Somerset for 25 years now, raised our 2 daughters here. And I have zero relevant career experience, unlike it seems like everybody else here, except a lot of sidewalk conversations with Rohit about, our frustrations about some of the houses, particularly the one Brian just mentioned. And, we renovated a 1950s split level when we moved to the neighborhood. And one of our primary concerns was to keep our house, as close to the original footprint of the original house as we could. And it's, driving around Greater Bethesda, some of the neighborhoods, you see the really egregious, the smaller decades-old homes with the towering, developer-built homes next to them. And as we are starting to see this happen more and more in Somerset, I'm hoping that maybe we can kind of put the brakes on some of the more outrageous. I know I'm also confused about, or maybe somebody can enlighten us all about, we have Montgomery County regulations and Somerset regulations, but you know, what is the advantage of having the Somerset regulations if they seem to be sort of ruled by what Montgomery County allows, square footage wise, I guess, and height wise and everything else. And I know we've also been impacted by stormwater issues, by upstream houses that were built. So that's another concern. And yeah, just kind of my interest in keeping Somerset. And, you know, the developers can outbid everybody else when a house goes up for sale. And that seems to be the trend with some of the older houses getting, you know, you just can't compete with the developer money. And
I don't think the developer is usually the high bidder. I don't agree with that.
that they cannot bid.
They're not usually, that's my opinion. And it's also, some sellers think I'll sell to the builder and see. And I don't know, the profit to be right, that's price. And there are sellers who are, this is my family home, I can never go and tear it down. They have all one units, but you know, we have a lot of buildings, but if you look at the price history, they're not, the prices they pay are not the high for them.
Okay, well, I stand corrected. It was just my understanding that at least a couple that I was aware of, that, you know, individuals tried to purchase and they, but your expertise in that area is,
That's my perception.
yeah.
I'm feeling the answer's gonna be all of, well, let's keep talking.
Oh, well, I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine. We're pretty much wrapped up.
You know, I'm Phyllis Wiesenfelder. I've lived here since 1982. I've been in real estate since 1989. I've watched things change in people's perceptions. It's always been interesting to me that there never really was a community discussion about development. Some neighborhoods, the town of Chevy Chase had a lot of fights. I think it was one, but you know what? We did have a historic district, and some people, you know, in the historic district, I always think that's what's protected our charm. And I've been a little surprised as I think about it. I mentioned, Robert, that we have Sears, Kit Houses that aren't in the historic district. We have Philip William Smith, another architect. That's not, those are unprotected houses. We have in Freeman houses. Some neighborhoods have put mid-century homes in historic districts. Carteret Springs, it's not builder friendly. They have their mid-century homes. I will say there's some houses that are beyond, or they can be renovated. You know, they're about to go into this repair. I'm not sure renovation was in their future, but I know, you know, the historic district, I think, was around 1989, and we never opened up the discussion again. And my recollection is some people opposed because they didn't want to be in that district. There's a house across the street, two houses across the street. One's the same, one's new construction. That my understanding, foremen or workers when we were tobacco fields lived in them, but they weren't declared historic. Maybe that's not interesting to anyone, but I think it's kind of anyway. So just that issue interests me, and I also emailed you I was on a course and DC has the bill, what it's called, about related to when you renovate, or I should say develop, what's the impact on your neighbors? And neighbors get very upset about what's next to them. But I'm not sure the person who builds or renovates really has to care much about neighbors. I mean, I don't know how we deal with that concept, but I've been thinking about that. And stormwater, since the town approves things one at a time, I don't think we look at the cumulative effect. Like that driveway was okay, carrying those trees down okay, you're downhill, you're going to get some flood on, but everything that your neighbors did is legal. It's just interesting that we can open it up for discussion.
I hadn't thought about that point, but looking at house after house after house after house is not community planning, that's just, point impact question.
And different councils. Some people have different point of view. Some of our houses, are sort of obsolete, but the way people want to live today. The question is, do you renovate or do they want a new house? But it's philosophical too. What does the new members of the community want? But our own housing stock is sort of what passes for affordable. If you buy a Rambler, you buy it at that price, you're not looking for new construction, you could kind of look forward to come here. I mean, the level has been raised considerably in the last 6-7 years, but that's,
Yes.
yeah.
What's the border of the historic? There are parts of Cumberland, parts of Dorset that are historic.
And a historic house, a house designated historic. Soon after it was knocked down, it was a fabulous Art Deco. I don't know if that happened, but it's hit or miss. There are plenty of houses, I think.
So it's by house, it's not a boundary.
It is, but it stops like on Cumberland. I have a 1982 house. It has no historic merit, but I'm next to a log cabin, so that protects the log cabin. So in some ways, I'm very grateful to be in the historic district because I know what's going to be next to me. But there are plenty of it, like there's a farmhouse all the way down on Cumberland, that's not in this, there's a Sears Kid House, the end of Cumberland, not historic. Not everybody wants to be in the historic district.
What's the cost of land right now in Somerset? If you look at your assessment, your house, your land's worth more than your house. So you've got people that are coming in. It's at least $1 million. What would be the number of those?
I think it depends on the lot size. Michelle, your house, I always thought that would have cost you more if you could have knocked it down. It was kind of
100%.
sad to me to think that, that house would gotten the sellers more as a tear down. And so I thank you for doing that.
The developer bought it. There's a big story to that house.
I missed that.
They bought it from us because the real estate agent, they were, I don't know, we were in Singapore, they bought it. They paid a little bit more for it, and we thought we had bid on it, but they couldn't make it work because it's expensive. Like, to have a house like that it's historic, there's so many rules. And so, again, my vendetta against developers, but they tried to buy it, and because they thought they had someone who would they had a buyer, which would have been us, and we said no. And so that, then the developer, I think the Sandy Spring, actually,
Oh,
then they ended up walking and we bought it for less. Because the owner tried to, you know, whatever, it was a crazy story, but, yeah, the developers are always doing that.
because, in 2010, 2011, there were 3 houses on Essex. Now, this is memory, I don't have it in front of me, sold for like 1,618 because of the big lots.
Yeah, they're big lots, yeah.
16,000 square feet, 18,000 square feet, 33,000 square feet to tear down now in Essex, sold for 3. In other neighborhoods, perhaps that would have been same because it could have been a mid-century renovation. Sorry, I don't quite have the usual real estate agent perception of this, but I mean, I think it's kind of a shame sometimes, but I do think there are houses like your house, it's really hard.
It's a shithole.
Yeah, okay. This
Yeah,
my
what goes there?
mistake, it was my mistake. Okay. So.
No, but we bought it, that's it, but that means after that, we
I
put it out.
mean, that, but, no, I mean, it's not one story fits all.
I think what you were alluding to is such a good example about how property becomes less attractive to developer when there are more restrictions.
When it's historic, it's not very,
So when it's historic or if the permitting process is complicated or the town has new codes or, I mean, there's any number of ways to discourage that.
There is a flip side. Flip side is, I don't know anyone, I shouldn't say. Generally speaking, when you were selling a house, and I have sold several, you generally were happy to take the highest price, not the lowest price. And I don't know anyone here who would, I shouldn't say that. Maybe there are people in the neighborhood who, when they come to sell their house, they'll be happy to take 15% less as they move on and either retiring to wherever they're gonna retire, whatever. But the people who we bought from were about to start construction to renovate the house to make it good enough to sell. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars, I believe.
No,
Well, they were supposed to start like the day after we saw it. They were fixing water damage that was done. And we walked in on a Sunday, we put an offer on Monday, and they had, you know, a virtually no contingent sale for a house they had to do nothing with. I think we're pretty happy. I mean, I know they're very happy about it. So that is the flip side.
Where's the house?
I'm gonna pay 5504 Surrey. So if you go in Surrey Street, south of Essex, there are 2 houses that have been torn down and rebuilt. One is on the right, there's one south, and it's not, there's one on the left at the end of the lot. You sold both of those lots within probably a week or 2 of each other. We built programs at the exact same time. And those are the only 2 teardowns on Surrey, south of Essex, I believe.
yeah,
And this was in 2016.
I don't think the seller would agree with tear downs, but on the flip side, I just want to make one other point that the most expensive house sales in the neighborhood have been in the historic district.
well, that corner house, right? The corner house.
The old Rockefeller house, the one, there was one on Dorset that sort of, you know, and then a 4-7, so 6, a 5-3, a 4-7.
So they're also large, very large lots.
Yeah, they all this work is.
Pardon my interruption, but I need to do a quick time check.
Yeah.
Phyllis, you need to leave at 4.
But
Well, I just want to make sure that before you leave, we can talk about the meeting times.
Yeah.
And that conversation's great, and we're actually covering several points of the agenda all at once. But I do want to finish introductions and then make sure we had enough time to,
Your fine is 20.
I can leave at 4:15.
okay. Good, thank you. Yeah, I think it's your turn.
I'm Ken Brown. I live on Trent Court at the top of Trent Street. Been there for about 28 and a half years. 2 kids who went to Westland and BCC. And we had a big tear down right next door to us that happened a long time ago. You know, they were friends of ours who we knew beforehand because our kids went to nursing school together. So I mean, you know, it was big. It's more out of scale to our street, but you know, they've been great neighbor. I think this stuff is complicated, and I think there are a lot of different perspectives on this. We're also at the stage of our life where we don't know how much longer we're going to live here, and our house should be torn down. If I were going to buy our house, I wouldn't want the house that's there. You know, it was not built that great in the beginning. It's okay. You know, it's okay. It's been a great house for us, but I think for the future. So in my mind, tear downs aren't bad. But what's the scale of the rebuild? I mean, and what's the impact of the rebuild? And what's the impact on the community? I think is more of my perspective on that. I care personally about the environmental impacts. Our loss of tree canopy is concerning. The stormwater issues, both from a pollution perspective and from a, you know, impacting your neighbors from the management of stormwater, I think is important. And I guess the other thing I would just mention is one concern I have is it's from what I've heard so far, it seems like the perspectives of most of the people on the committee sound pretty similar. They sound more anti-developer, anti-building big. And my guess is that there's a lot of different viewpoints in the neighborhood. And so one question is, how do we interact with I mean, this could be a hugely divisive issue, depending on how it's taken on. And, you know, we all want to build community and keep the sense of that. And how do we address it? You know, and there aren't any perfect answers to this stuff. This is really complicated stuff. It is property rights versus community rights and community interests, and both are important. And how do you balance that? And I don't know the answers to that, but I'd be interested. You know, is there an interest in surveying the community? What do they think about it somewhere in the process? What do they think about some of these ideas? You know, ranking. You know, it just seems like how we interact with the rest of the community is important. I think it's important to publicize. I'm sure we are that this committee is happening. Sometimes people don't. You know, reading the newsletter isn't just enough to know. You know, people often find out about controversial things way down the pike, and it's better that people hear about them earlier. So anyway, I'll stop there. But I'm looking forward to this. I think they're interesting issues. They're important issues. Many communities around the country are wrestling with these. I don't think there are easy answers at all.
Were you impacted essentially along Essex on your side of the street? It's been a number of rebuilds and, you know,
Right behind us.
yeah.
We got good
and
trees back there.
I'm surprised you didn't, I thought that's why you were here. That the impact of those people.
No, I live on Trent. Our backyard is to Essex. We're the Terry Wofford is right behind us.
Right, I know.
And then there are a bunch of.
And that's what one developer house was.
Yeah, so they're all happening. You know, we haven't had any stormwater issues, even though we're downhill from them. I think people, you know, did a good job grading our area, you know. And we have good trees that protect us, which is nice. And so, you know, I'm not sure where I stand on all these issues, but I am interested in figuring out how we interact with the entire community.
Thank you. I just saw him come up.
I'm Kumar Vaswani. I think I might have you all beat because I've lived in Somerset for 40 years. I actually grew up here. Wow. Not to brag, but I don't come at this with any specific policy prescriptions. What I am concerned about is the process and having clear standards, because what I've found from observing council meetings for the last 5 years is that the council is really struggling with these issues. And sometimes, particularly when it comes to variances, they're making decisions based on really no standards at all. It's whatever 3 council members believe is the right thing to do. So, and then relatedly, I think one of our main goals should be to try to set up a system or facilitate a system where the council has the information it needs to make an intelligent decision, because someone mentioned that there were no elevation drawings in some of the council packets. I think that's, you know, a huge flaw. I think permit applicants are submitting them, but they're just not making it into the packet. And I doubt that most council members have time to come to the town hall, look at the physical copies of the application. I want to just put in a plug for a recommendation that the Public Safety Committee made recently to ensure that all residents have 30 days notice of any permit hearings, and that the town release permit applications almost as soon as they receive them, instead of having them in the office for 2 or 3 months before they're released to the public. So if you read our journal article in the most recent journal, you can learn about it, and I hope you'll write to the council and advocate for that sort of common sense, the 2 common sense recommendations. One thing I will just add about tree canopy is that's an issue that several council members repeatedly bring up in council meetings, that they're concerned about loss of tree canopy. You know, when permit applicant wants to tear down a building, we usually ask for you know, removal of 8 or 9 trees often. And it's been something that's been lamented about, but no one's come up with any suggestions for it. It might be a bit far afield for us, but you know, once you get into the issue of private trees on private property, how can you regulate them? How can you encourage retention of trees? And it's just a really interesting issue that I wish someone would look at.
I don't think our penalty is so big if somebody takes a tree down that they're not supposed to. I mean, like, they get approval for 5 trees and see like 8 trees, 10 trees, and they'll spend millions a house. So they spend 1,000 trees, 5 trees.
Pretty
So,
yeah.
yeah.
But the town has a requirement, you have to replace,
Yeah.
you do have to replace
I
1 for
know.
1.
It's thinking, I mean.
Nancy?
Just one follow-up before I introduce myself.
Okay.
I think we could have landscape requirements together with when we look at site planning, that there should be a requirement for landscaping, because that, in so many instances, can save poor architecture. And my sense is a little bit more toward the design aspect of things. My background's fine arts and urban planning. And I've worked private sector, nonprofit. The last part of my career was with the government doing healthcare planning, strategic planning. But my interest basically really came to light when the house on Greystone at 5522 was built directly across the street from me. And it just seemed impossible that that was conforming with town codes. It just, I still don't believe it. You know, and I remember all the discussions with Matt Trollinger about heights, and there were so many exceptions or variances. And I think that's one thing that we need to focus on is the permitting process and being more restrictive about getting variances. Because I think that just sort of chips away things. And a good example is like what's happened on Grantham Avenue, because true, the developer has changed the scale and the mass of his building. But in my opinion, it's still an eyesore because the design of it has nothing to do with mid-century. It has nothing to do, it looks nothing like the other houses on the street. So while it's not objectionable in terms of its mass, I think it is in terms of design. And it doesn't have to cost more to have good design. So that's,
I'm with you. Because that developer, he cuts a lot of corners and I watched him do it. And, you know, maybe there's a different height standard for a flat roof than pitched roof, because those are two different things. And he also mentioned to me when he was trying to sell me on his design, you have a squatty roof because of your new Somerset standards. And so, you know, I can't build up. And I didn't push him too much on it. I didn't know what our Somerset standards were for the sites, but I do think you need to keep in mind design, because that is important also. And
so hard to do.
but I think we could make a differentiation between a flat roof, which are these modern things that they're building, which aren't really even on, you know, and a pitched roof, or hip roof, or a traditional roof. I think.
I promise you, we will get into great detail about roof average.
Yeah.
This
I know
developer-
you, Nancy.
We will- we
This
will get
developer,
there.
it's like an off-the-shelf
I
design.
know.
The house he's building, you could see it on.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. With no variation to accommodate at all style of the other houses.
There are a few more people I'd like to meet, including honored guests. So we cover everyone. Ron, you wanna?
I'm Ron Nitz, I'm not on the committee. I live in Surrey Street, 554. I did buy Middle Tops, we did tear it down. Because additional interest probably has been in the process that we went through that down. There were some things that I thought were just somewhat ridiculous in terms of the process and in terms of the rules that we were applied. There were many things that were fine, but trivial the things that were fine.
When did you
Don't stick
move
in mind. We bought our house in, we put it under contract in October of 2015. It took us 30 days to close. It was a cash deal. It took us about a year to get the permit, the architecture loans and the permits. We disassembled the old house and had a lot of it taken away by a nonprofit at Baltimore. We used many of the fixtures in November of 2016. They poured the foundation the week before Christmas. We moved in the Friday after the week after Thanksgiving, the 27th, so like 8 days after Thanksgiving. We did build, we hit the lot coverage limit to within 2 square feet. We were below the height limit by a couple inches. If someone said in one of the meetings over Grantham House, why do we have to build to the limits? I guess the answer is because that's the limit. You know, if you didn't want us to build to the limit, so it's like, why did you build the limit? You should have said, here's the limit, but we only want you to build to 80% of the limit. And how do you know, we build to it because that's what the rule is. The fact is that the community has values, those values are reflected in the standards. And I've got no problem changing the standard. I think if that's, you know, part of the decision, I think that, you know, it's important to be careful in doing so because it does have economic consequences to the value. The fact is, if the standards get changed so that it's harder to renovate, that makes my house more valuable because the people who want a big, you know, a big house, as I said, there'll be a smaller supply of them, it'll make the value of my house go up. But when we had to take down a tree that was 12 inches, it was like an 8-foot tree probably, it's 12 inches from the foundation of the old house, and it cracked the foundation of the old house. the lot was not really buildable with that tree because of the root system. And the council spent 40 minutes trying to decide if instead we could have a design of a house that could go around it, which would essentially mean we'd have a box in the front, a box in the back, and a corridor of the opposite. We would have had a reverse C-shaped house, and it was frankly somewhat ridiculous conversation. But they did get approved. And then I guess one of the other externalities of the town code, if you walk there, also look there, I believe we have a quite same footprint as the previous driveway. We had a really poured concrete, except for the apron. The apron is broken and cracked, because if we changed the apron, then we had to narrow the driveway. We didn't want to narrow the driveway, because it's hard to back out of the driveway, because people park it. They have a wider driveway that allows you to essentially do a good part of the turn in your driveway to get on the driveway. When you have a much narrower driveway, it's actually a lot harder to get out of the driveway, and increased risk of hitting the Lexus and people with that behind the driveway, which happened once. The visitor didn't know what they were doing.
I deal with that issue precisely across the street from me because they have a double wide driveway
And it helps.
and a larger apron. So what it means is we've lost parking
You can't
all
park,
on the
but
street.
you can't park on my side of the street anyway.
That's a different
It's
situation.
you can't, you're not taking any parking space away. The fact is, water pumps there and mosquitoes live in the water this time, whatever.
So you will return to the driveway.
Yeah, so, but again, I think that it's useful to have as best as possible objective standards. It doesn't mean you can't come up with objective standards that deal with some of these issues about the mass, about this. I didn't look at all that. But when you start getting into architectural design, it just becomes so much individual people's taste. I've lived in the neighborhood that had that. The people with the place, oh, their shutter, it doesn't have the right, the right slats in the shutter. And I'm like, really, I mean, there's a lot of variation. Sears homes, their log cabins, and there are big homes like mine. I appreciate that home does not fit the character of that street, but it's not out of character for the neighborhood. It is out of character for the street. And maybe there's something to be said for short of historic designation, which comes with a lot of rules of stuff. Davidson stance,
So a lot of people
Um,
have to be up.
but there may be something short you could do for smaller chunks of the paper.
Right, so I'm activating the time nudge. We have a couple other folks on Zoom. Matt and Amsalu. Matt Morley, are you cooking dinner yet, or can you just say hi?
Yeah, hi, I'm
Sorry.
Matt Morley. Is everything all right?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Okay, I live next door to Ron, and I live next door to the Grantham house that's being taken down. So I was very interested in these issues, especially for water runoff.
Thank you, Matt. Anything else about you you'd like us to know?
I'm a lawyer. I'm retired. I was a lawyer for 45 years, and I've lived here since 1986, 40 years now.
Great. Amsalu, are you still with us?
Yes, hi, I am. I appreciate everyone's time. I know it's late. So my name is Amsalu Debella Biketti. I moved here about 2 to 3 years ago, and I might be in the minority in that I bought my house and I did interior renovations and some exterior landscaping in the back, but I didn't change. I love the overall appearance, and so I didn't change anything about the footprint of the house itself. I did have some kind of very awkward and a little bit initially unpleasant interactions with the town permitting process because I was completely unaware of it. My realtor did not inform me, and I found out the hard way when I got, my contractor, would relay to me that neighbors were unhappy. So I'm come to this environment, this meeting, this committee. I am curious about the process. I'd love to learn more. It sounds like I'm one of the younger people here, and so I envision being part of Somerset for some time. And I would like to know kind of what you know, what direction this kind of committee would take and be a voice in that process. I do think that my understanding of the permitting process, and it's really like there are some huge gaps in terms of what the permit process and the town regulations cover and what it doesn't cover, and it just really hasn't really kept up with the times, it seems like. So it'd be great to kind of update that for the times we live in. So, and I'm also a radiologist. I'm currently still working. That's why I'm off screen.
Great, nice to meet you, thanks.
To meet you.
I'll say a few words about me and then we can do some practical stuff, if that's all right. I'm here because our new mayor twisted my arm, both arms at the same time. I think it had something to do with my participation in the Grantham Avenue permit. And my reaction to it was there have to be objective standards to deal with the issues I care about. And so I did, 2 weekends of research and found all kinds of cities that have all kinds of objective, clear standards that are implemented in a very consistent way. So I know it can be done. You may not like those standards, but let's have a full and open conversation. So I'm a lawyer also. I spent almost all of my career at Georgetown Law, teaching in clinical programs there, 48 years. I finished my career doing mostly international trade negotiations that affect cities and states and human rights of workers in international supply chains. But in the days when I still had hair, I was a lawyer for the DC Council for 5 years. And then I was a lawyer for the Montgomery County Council for 5 years. And I did about 5 years of work as an advocate for neighborhood preservation in the District of Columbia. So I've been around the block in terms of administrative law. I know how that works. And I was happy to move on from being real estate professionals. Most of them did not come near your standard of being a human being, but so I didn't look back. But it's a pleasure down to return to my roots and get to know all you. So let me put it this way, given that Phyllis is leaving in a few minutes, and Merlinda has to leave in 10 minutes, I'd like to flip part of the agenda and just talk about how we do work together. I'll introduce it by saying we're all volunteers here. And you, like me, may have had 1 or 2 arms twisted to be around. And so I have no assumptions about how much time you can put in or how much work you can put in. All I know is that he kind of thinks that you are a person who should be part of this process. And I assume he has excellent reasons because I trust his judgment implicitly. So that's good enough for me. The range of what you could do on this committee is really up to you. If all you want to do is to come to meetings and read the stuff and learn and be a critic, that's great. That's a really valuable role. Because learning the community starts with us. And his view in terms of taking the pulse of the community is he wants this committee to be a pulse. He wants us to have a pulse based on knowledge of what the options are. And then we can build from there. We can take it from there, which I'm pretty sympathetic to this point of view. Or some of us who shall remain nameless love to dive into the weeds and do a lot of research and draft policy options. That's great too. If you want to focus on historic districts, I'd love it if you could take the lead on that, even if it's just basically to figure out is the model that we've used in one side of town something that anybody wants to use on the other side. If you want to focus on drainage, wonderful. It would be great to have somebody with that technical expertise. The more of these issues that we can cover based on your personal interest, the better. It'll help us get to more issues faster. It's just that simple. But if you're anywhere in between, if there's some kind of research that you would like to do, like policy information or more public education material, we need that. If you are like those of us who like to dive into the municipal codes, we need that too. So just to summarize, I have no expectations. Any role you want to play is fine, And the more worker bees we have, the more we get done, but I'm sure we can fulfill our mission pretty well without everybody having to do the same thing.
I really like Ken's idea of trying to do some sort of a survey of the town to see, because, you know, as he said, I come at this maybe from a little bit more of a, I mean, I'm not anti-development, I'm anti, you know, outrageous development, but, you know, I recognize there's a lot of older housing stock that needs to be, you know, replaced, improved, whatever. But there are probably just as much of a diversity, you know, opinions as there are in this room in the entire community. So maybe we should kind of feel the pulse of the Somerset community and see, you know, maybe if you live in one of the homes that's in question, you're very happy that you're.
So like I said, you can make your own adventure. If you want to take your work in that direction, I'm all for it. What I've been wanting to set up is needing. When I sent out that calendar poll, I was first shocked. I thought, oh my God, I just made a terrible mistake sending this poll out. Because everybody went in all possible directions and only 3 people could meet at the same time. And then the board intervened, or something happened, something extraterrestrial happened, because when I settled on an apparently bad date, the least worst date, and announced it, everybody said, oh, we can come. So it may be that this day of a typical summer week works for people, maybe not. But I'd like to propose a method of meeting which sounds like this. 1 formal committee meeting a month. We have way more work than we need to justify 1 meeting a month. And then that, you know, we aim for a quorum that week. I don't expect to be taking any votes for quite a while, any polls among ourselves, but eventually we'll get around to that. But 1 meeting a month, aim for a quorum, and, you know, try to maximize participation in that 1 meeting per month. In between those meetings, I'd like to do another meeting, which I'll call a research check-in. And we'll treat that under the Open Meetings Act as a meeting, and we'll give everybody notice and encourage everybody to come. But even if it's just those who may work in that historic district, that could be a meeting. It'll depend on who's doing what research, and I'd like to use that meeting as a nudge for everybody who's taking a piece of the puzzle to work on it. You can come in and share your progress.
I don't think it's for district necessarily be a popular concept, but in response to was said, I don't think everyone's aware that it's a voluntary form, so to speak, but supposed to disclose to potential buyers as a town of Somerset and sit with links so to find out about our permit process and other things. Government says it just got to feel it's on our phones library. Initially, the listing agent notes to include it. It doesn't have any impact on whether the contract gets ratified, but it's a disclosure because I think that it's mentioned she didn't know that there were requirements in the town, and people don't know unless they're told.
Well, this is, I think, fundamental. We need to understand what is the process, because everyone has a different perception.
Right.
So I think staff needs to make a presentation. This is what we do when we get a set of plans, and what does it set off? Who do they contact? And this is, she's our neighbor, and she was one of the people I was referring to. Said that if I had known this, I wouldn't have bought this house.
So that's
not
that.
in the contract that lets, I'm sorry, lets a prospective buyer know we're not in the HOA. That's good, but so it's kind of a disclosure issue.
I think that's a very creative.
It's voluntary. Robert, I happen to have a conversation when it's walking.
We don't want to scare.
I think we all.
Right.
So
We don't want to scare them.
Joe just answered my 3rd question. I'm still on my 2nd question.
Oh,
Thank you for the answer. We'll come back to it. My second question is, can we have some kind of conversation about meeting times? It struck me that as some of us at least work in the daytime hours, business hours, may be difficult to pull yourself out of work, even in the summertime. So in consideration of that, I'm just wondering if we might have a bias toward our monthly meetings to meet in the evening. Like the council work sessions do at 7 p.m. And if that's a reasonable theory, can we discuss which day of the week might work best? Or if you want to blurt out any other time you want to allow these. Or
Lunchtime kind of session, would that work? People are sort
I
of,
think working people are
Yeah,
gonna
I would have to zoom in
be
for that.
distracted to the middle of the day. I think we're gonna get more people's full attention if we do it in the evening. I would, even though I'm super flexible, but
I suggest Wednesdays, just because if you have a holiday, you know, Fridays and Mondays kind of get, oh, sorry, we're gonna go to the beach, and you potentially can lose people, particularly nice weather. It's just, I just throw that out there. I'm glad we got this day, a Friday. I was watching that too, and I said, geez, we're not even gonna have our first meeting.
okay,
Wednesdays at 7. All in favor?
That's good.
Works. It's once a month, Wednesdays, and then when with the research check-in? Could we schedule that individually, or what do you recommend?
well, I'd like to not do it individually. Because the more people is better, because we educate each
not
other.
today,
And I've learned a
yes.
lot in this conversation.
Oh,
More people is better than mutual education.
Maybe.
It's just that simple. So if evenings are rough for you, and you can only do one a month, you can maybe make the research check-in meeting early in the morning, or pick another day, maybe hop around a little bit.
Yeah, something's.
Keep canceling people out.
I think that's mornings.
I don't know what time.
My morning.
Yeah.
11 to 1, so.
But afternoons are better.
Or evenings bad for you?
Sometimes, yeah, in the summer, but, you know, it's fine. 'Cause I didn't know if the research check-in, I guess, was a normal meeting with everyone same time, or that would be like smaller groups.
Right.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it would be a normal meeting. It's just, that's why we can be more relaxed about it. If we say that you can handle one meeting a month and be on this committee and be happy, then that'll be good. But if you can make 2 meetings a month, I encourage it. And we can stick with Wednesday at 7 and just make sure that we alternate, for example, the first and second, or the second, fourth, something of that nature. So for that, and that's worth.
Sorry,
it. Okay.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you so much. See you later. Have a good weekend. See you. Thanks.
Robert, can we also schedule a presentation by the town folks on
That's the third question.
permitting process? Okay.
Yes. I'm just jumping ahead to my calendar here. So looking at July. Maybe, first and third Wednesday? Kind of easy to remember.
July 1st.
So the first Wednesday in July is July 8th.
Oh.
July 8th.
Must be the first.
July 1st. My calendar.
Yeah.
It's the 8th, it's the first.
Is it the 1st and the 15th, or the 8th? Okay.
Why, it's not showing.
Oh,
There you go.
Oh, sorry.
Or do you want to do the 8th and the 22nd?
Oh.
I think the first is close to, I mean, I'm here either way, but there's vacation. I don't know.
Essentially, that's a month from home.
Yeah.
And if it is a staff presentation, to me, the sooner the better. From my personal perspective, that, and I don't think it's any requirements. It's what do you do?
All right, so
What are we doing?
first Wednesday of the month and the third Wednesday of the month. Let's try that, see if it works. And we get friction along the way, we can adjust. Excellent. Okay. One of the agenda items was indeed, what would you like for orientation? What kind of staff briefings would you like? So permitting process?
Yeah, I think this meeting, we've heard a lot about variances and how do things get done. So Steve should be a part of it and kind of how does he, how do things come on his radar? How does he resolve it? And just all those kind of really blocking and tackling type of stuff. That
And the current standards too, whatever they are. I mean, there are obviously some standards which I'm totally unaware of.
You want to worry about the process, you want to worry about the process, in the capital city, you want to worry about the objective standards. In terms of the construction of the building, and then secondly, you want to worry about the objective standard. Like the treatment of the land, which includes both water and food canopy. Then I think you need to know separately, what are the legal limits from what the town is able to do, separate from what the county can do. And then lastly, I think you need to know what is the county's role here, because the county plays an important role in things occur here. And I'm
I
not even
have a
sure.
question. Can anybody answer this question? I've always been under the assumption that you have to follow the most restrictive requirements. And if the town's requirements are more restrictive than the county, you have to go by the towns. That doesn't seem to happen.
There are two processes that overlay each other almost completely. And you have to comply with both. So for the Montgomery County process, you comply with Montgomery County standards. And then for Somerset, you comply with them, even if they're more restrictive. It's like reverse preemption. Somerset, in its own realm.
Are there any areas in which the county preempts the town though? In other words, does the county say there's certain areas in
Yes,
which?
so the zoning itself,
Okay,
the town has no zoning power, you know, like the R1 or,
Right,
others, you know, that the uses that are permitted. That's all county business. County is the planning district with Somerset.
But
However-
if the town designated 12 feet as the building height, could the town do that?
Yes.
you sure?
Yeah.
That's-
The town
that's-
did lower,
That's what I
the
thought.
town has a lower building
Yeah,
The
but 2
town
feet
is
is.
height
delegated
standards than the county.
permit power under the, for some reason, not the Home Rule Act,
Right,
but the Land Use Act.
okay,
Section 509 of the Land Use Act is very explicit. The town has full permit authority with respect to the metes and bounds of setbacks, lot size, lot coverage, mass and density.
okay.
Anything
And
we've talked about.
it's even more disturbing that we've ended up where we are. Because it
Well, this could have been.
didn't have
handled-
to be.
This could have been handled
20 years ago.
Well, the town has always had power to fix these issues.
So this is why it's important to have, what are we doing now?
Yeah.
And maybe for Nancy and her neighbors, because I've talked to some of the other neighbors. And basically, if they win the lottery, they would buy the house and tear it down. There's that much resentment. And again, I get back to we're a community. And that isn't the only one. There are houses on Dorset that I remember were issues. There are houses on Trent that the neighbors don't talk to each other. And this is not Somerset. It shouldn't be. And it gets back into, okay, I'll take you to court. And we sorry, lawyers, you keep them out because it ends up, there's resentments and the community suffers.
Yeah.
And I think if we can learn from, the Rosenthal House on Greystone, lessons that could be helpful, I'm curious as well. And also to tell your story in terms of how things work. And part of this process has gotten out of somewhat control because everything now is electronic. And it's out there and we've communicated it. And I could tell you, having gone through the process with our neighbor at 5407 Uppingham and also 5401 next door, it's broken. Because we were getting notice of plans, we'd go look at them, review them, and then they were different 2 months later when council was going to approve it. And this causes people to be suspicious of what's going on.
Right.
And so Justin, as taking notes as part of this presentation, is sort of what is the nitty-gritty of that process. And, when we moved in, if you had something, you went around to each of your neighbors. And what that did is you got to know your neighbor, even if you did not.
People got to be with them.
No,
You don't
no.
have to do
Well,
that.
we did on 5522. But what I signed, people had the impression that they were approving a plan when they signed off on it. The only thing that you're approving is that you were told that there's going to be a
Yeah,
development.
we talked.
But what they submitted and what I
That's
signed off on
different.
is nothing like what was built. So what happened in the meantime? Is out of control.
I know the town got rid of those signatures, because that was done before I was here, the idea of signatures done by your neighbors to show that they've been notified. But a lot of people thought it was a permission thing, and so people would use that as leverage to say, I'm not gonna sign that until
Yeah.
you do X, Y, and Z, and so now, and that basically wasn't really allowed, it's not what it was for. So now the town notifies the abutting properties before a building permit application is heard. 10 days before we send out an email and first class mail 10 days before the council meeting.
Let me be clear, that could be months after you received the permit.
Yes. So that's something
By
that,
that time, like, by that time, it was like already.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, so that's something the council's talked about, extending that to.
So in our very effective way, Phyllis is reminding me that we are now within 4 minutes of our witching hour.
Oh.
No good about that.
But you know what, Maura, I remember, Maura, didn't you bring your plans to me to sign off on it? And you're like all the way
Yeah, I
around.
think so. Yeah,
So
because
that
at that
was-
time,
at
it
that
was,
time, it wasn't just.
there was like a perimeter, of your property and you're really not,
Right.
but I think our
Not even close.
backyards were sort of.
So
Yes,
in my remaining 3 minutes,
okay.
I want to just touch on a few good housekeeping strategies. And pray for your indulgence. Open meetings. Or open meetings. Somebody wrote that. Open Meetings Act compliance is required for us. We're gonna record every meeting. We're gonna have minutes for every meeting. Even if when you record, you don't have to have minutes, but we're going to. Except knowing that we're already going to comply with the recording, our minutes are gonna be sparse. We're just gonna keep track of the topics we discuss, the next steps we promise to make, and any, positions we take, anything we vote on. That'll for sure be in minutes. And then when we convene again the next time, between Justin and me, we're gonna kind of review the minutes very quickly to make sure that this is what we captured from the prior meeting, and we missed anything. I do want to minimize the amount of parliamentary correctness that we spend time on, but I think that that basic approach should work and we won't overly formalize our process. Orientation, we're going to start with the 4 briefing templates, starting with the process itself. I like Ron's amendment, but we're not going to do them all at once. I think we can space them out and do one over the first several meetings of the committee. I want to return back to the idea of volunteer roles and ask you to keep doing what you started today. Today, you got excited about stuff you really care about. You got on the verge of volunteering to do a survey or whatever you might have done. Keep that in mind, because if you want to volunteer to do that kind of stuff, I say great, run with it, and I'll do my best to back you up. But what was the fun part of all this is the storytelling that goes on. Anything that we can convert into a story. This back in 1984, this happened to me. Or last month, this happened to you. And people relate to that better, and the stories can capture and embed all the nitty-gritty details and technical flaws of the process and the divisive dynamics of the process, which are not potential. They're already out there, as you see. This stuff is already divisive. What we're doing is trying to help the town figure out how to
Make it less divisive.
make it less divisive. Thank you. So keep this list in mind. This is the ground we like to cover. We don't have to cover all of it. We can cover half of it. That'll be great. But you've got stories and you've got experience and you've got creative ideas for some of the stuff on this list. When we come back in our next meeting, I'd like you to start volunteering the points at which you want to, plant your little flag. I have a story to share. I'm going to add it to our committee record. That's one of my points I want to speak to. I'm going to create a shared drive, a Google Drive, if you don't mind. I'm trying to figure out with Justin whether I can do that within the town's Google Drive system or whether I do it independently. You and I will work that out next week.
Yeah.
But then you'll get an email notice from me. I'll add you to it, Ron. I'll add Matt and absolutely if you want to be on it as well, so that everything we come up with in terms of our research, all the municipal codes we want to share. I talked to Steve this morning. He wants 8 codes. Okay, we'll do 8, but they'll all be in the drive. And so if you want to read Garrett Park's building code, it'll be there. And you can read as much or as little as you like. And I also sent you today my own rough cut at what I call a reader on these topics, just to give you a sense of what I found over a couple of weekends of research. You probably have stuff like that yourself, so please send it to me and I'll add it to the drive. And it'll all be there, covered my bases.
So it seems to me that the first thing we need is a presentation from the town about what's existing. Is there a reference or like what's the best way? And we don't want to wait till July 1st for that.
Well, if you want a briefing from the town, and we all can make it, then we need to schedule it for the meeting times. And
Isn't that what people were saying though? That we want that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought
I mean, that's
that's
a
what
good place
July
to start.
1st was,
Yeah,
we were
So we
talking.
can do that in October.
Yeah,
okay.
we'll definitely try to do that July 1st. And
Okay.
the only reason we wouldn't is because Steve is in Morocco or something.
Yeah, well, yeah. Oh.
Steve Circo, you're talking about. Okay.
So we're off and running. And when we pick up back again, we'll do that briefing. We'll start putting together pieces of the other briefings around a little bit because they're all relevant and interesting. And to the extent that we have these briefings, they'll be recorded. We can put together supporting materials, and anybody else in the community who wants to have a tutorial, it'll be there for creating a curriculum as we do. All right.
Thanks for being the chair.
Yeah, really.
It's a
Thanks
pleasure
for-
to meet you all and hear your stories.
Thank you
and
for,
we're gonna have fun.
thank you for doing this.
Yes, thank you for stepping up for this.
So, motion to adjourn.
Second. We started on time, we ended on time.